Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Time for another show. Time marches on. It's one of those things we can't seem to put a stop to, no matter how hard we try. So, are we ready? What do you think? We'll see. Today being Tuesday, one, whether or not this is the last day I make any more Eastern Orthodox calendar jokes, or two, I can't ever stop, or three, I'm actually waiting for maybe the patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church actually saying something like this. Let's see. I've got an interesting message here. Justice tells me something's going on with Skype. I tested my Skype this morning, and it seemed to be okay, but we'll see. I don't see any messages from him here this morning, so that's too bad. All right, well, we'll see whether that's working. We could try it out again. Hopefully it will resolve itself before 10:30 or so, when we expect to hear from Joan McCarter for the first time in a little bit. She's been on vacation, and this would just figure, you know. She's about to come back, and can't make it work. But sometimes the first Tuesday back from vacation, it's a little difficult to remember that it's Tuesday again, and time to call in, and I absolutely sympathize with that situation. I'm sure that I would be missing the same thing, but we'll see. Imagine if everything is going right and we still can't make it work because Skype isn't working. Skype is dragging. Okay, all right, well, it might work. Maybe by 10:30 it will wake up and be in working order. So, okay, well, all right. Maybe it's just for him. That's a possibility too. I'm seeing your messages now, so we're doing pretty good, I think. Although, maybe the message that Skype is dragging for me, and it might not be working, could have been sent 15 minutes ago. I don't know. For all I know, that's what's going on. All right, well, let's see. Twitter's working. You guys can always use that. Please do use the KITM hashtag so your messages hang around a little bit longer. And Bill in Portland, Maine has done just that, as he does most every morning. Kagro in the Morning is live now. Kagro X documents yesterday's incidents of President Biden's raging malignant narcissism. I'm done. I finished up. What does he do with the other hour and 59.999 minutes? That's up to me. All right, well, good. I've got plenty of time to do it. There were none. I went out and had an afternoon outside of the house for the first time in a long time. I actually went and played golf for the first time in a long, long time. Probably, well, certainly all pandemic. I thought pandemic might be a great time to actually do that once we got to the point where they would allow you back on the golf course. But no, it's really not. It was a busy time. But I went out there and I saw all the changes that they made. I'd read about some of them that the golf courses had to make. They don't want you. They're still operating in a don't touch anything mode, I guess. And so all of the items that would be shared touched items that are normally out on the golf course, the humorously named ball washers, which if you are not familiar with it, not what it sounds like initially, but I don't know, maybe your mind went immediately to cleaning the golf balls. But if you don't play, you probably didn't think about the fact that you have to clean the ball in the middle of the game. It's not usually the case in most sports. Anyway, that's gone, and you're not supposed to pull out the flag sticks and whatnot and whatever else. So, yeah, you know, they sometimes have water coolers out on the course. Could have used that yesterday. Those aren't available. Various other shared items removed from the golf course. But for the most part, people remain distanced when playing golf. Anyway, so it was a good one to let people back out and allow them some outside time. Let's see. The bad news is, I suppose, that taking a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it's been, off from golf has not improved my game any. The good news is that it hasn't damaged it any either. So I'm in a stage of golf stasis. And I guess that's good news. More relevant news, let's say, for the rest of you, might be found in Pocket or in this morning's Twitter chatter. Just noting for the record, I guess, I'll point this out. I'll have to dig this thing up. But I just saw, as you might guess, in my feed, Armando is somewhat prominent in the feed, and he's calling attention, generally speaking, as many of you are. I would say, since I saw Armando do it, who knows how many people did it before him, but, half a dozen people afterwards who are in my feed have been concentrating on this one that Monica Klein has shared with everybody. Monica Klein, let's see, a Democratic strategist, I'm going to assume, is how she might have described herself. Although, well, she didn't describe herself that way. She might not disagree. Her description says, communications for working people, which might not necessarily mean Democrat, founder of Seneca Strategies, so we have that, as well as founder of the Boardroom NYC, based in Brooklyn, and I guess that explains the interest in two of the, I don't know how many, 100,000, 15,000, mayoral candidates in New York City. Among the many asked in a New York Times mayoral endorsement interview series, there were two of the 15 billion people running for mayor in New York, I think, who answered the question curiously incorrectly. The question must have been put to all of them, which was essentially, do you happen to know, or can you give us an estimate, a guess, the median sales price for a home in Brooklyn right now? And apparently this is of great interest to people in Brooklyn and probably everywhere. And two candidates, Sean Donovan and who's the other one here? Ray McGuire. Both not only gave the wrong answer, a way wrong, everybody probably gave something wrong, but a way wrong answer, but the same way wrong answer. And it's hard to imagine how it was done. Well, essentially they gave the same answers. Let's see. Sean Donovan said, well, in Brooklyn, I don't know for sure, he said, but I would guess it's around $100,000. This is, of course, the median home price in Brooklyn, New York, actual New York. $100,000 was Sean Donovan's guess. Ray McGuire's guess said it's got to be somewhere in the $80,000 to $90,000 range, even lower, if not higher. Apparently, the median sales price for a home in Brooklyn, both homes or apartments, is $900,000. And that's quite astonishing, really, to not to be able to guess something a little bit higher. I did see somebody else saying, I don't know how you get asked that question and you don't guess $1 million. You might as well guess $1 million, but you would be closer to right than you would be at guessing $100,000. And in fact, it would be awfully difficult to find anywhere in the country where the median home price was actually $100,000. I'm sure there's somewhere, but not a whole lot of places. Median, remember, of course, median is the one where you'd have to get 50% of the home prices would have to be below, in the case of, who answered this one? McGuire, $80,000. That seems, let's say, unlikely. And, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you about why you would guess so low. And really, again, this is like one of those questions that I think should be recognizable as a setup, essentially. That, obviously the number is going to be pretty high. This sounds like one of those questions where you're meant to think it's low-ish or under control in one way or another, perhaps, and then you'll find out, surprisingly, it's a lot higher. Also pointed out in these exchanges, for instance, by Dave Weigel, pointing out that Sean Donovan, he mentions, is a former HUD secretary. So, or that seems like maybe you would be maybe more in touch with the housing market. Of course, it was back in 2009 through 2014. Still feels like something that, the prices would only go up from that point. So pecking it around $100,000. Well, that's just one of those things. Meanwhile, I guess on the other side of the aisle, it should be recognized that one of the ongoing problems in Republican ranks are the Republicans who have it put to them one way or another, or enter into this line of questioning voluntarily on their own about what constitutes a middle class income. And they are very frequently, as far back as I recall, as far back as the 1990s, we had Republican members of Congress saying that, something in the neighborhood of $400,000 in family income puts you at solidly middle class. You might be able to keep your head above water if you did that. What was that guy's name? I can't remember. There was like a one-termer 1994 Gingrich Republican Revolution member of Congress, I think from North Carolina. I wonder how I could track that down. And he had, I don't know, I want to say his first name was Fred something, and he had kind of a something or other, multiple syllable last name, a Heimer or a Weiner or something in there. I'll see if I can figure that one out during one of the breaks. But yeah, he was the first one that I saw make that particular mistake. And then I saw it repeated in the last 10 years or so by 2 or 3 different Republican congressmen. And, of course, nobody remembered the one that I remembered first, because even I didn't remember it. I just can't pull that guy's name out of my head. It's in there somewhere. We'll get to it. In the meantime, because I can't take a break and let anybody else talk and go looking for that, I will turn to Pocket instead, and we'll see if we can't track down some other stories that might be worth sharing. I saw one this morning that reminded me again of another earlier Republican, but not that much earlier. It was like last week. A profile of Josh Hawley in the Washington Post under the headline, "Grievance, Rebellion, and Burnt Bridges, Tracing Josh Hawley's Path to the Insurrection," which sounds interesting, all in its own right. But it actually made me think a little bit about the various profiles done of Stephen Miller from the last White House, of course, the guy who threw out his very expensive order of sushi that one time that a restaurant worker claimed that he recognized him and said, "Enjoy your sushi," and that was enough for him to, you remember the story. But it seems like he was has built his career on the same basis. Not surprising, given how the two of them turned out, but the idea of him being an early and precocious ultra-conservative a-hole, essentially, is what we're looking at here. This is I don't know how long the profile is. It looks pretty lengthy from the scroll bar here, so it might not be something we spend a great deal of time reading all the way through, although we might want to digest it in bits and see what kind of person we're talking about. To get a flavor for it here, I'll give you a few minutes of here. Michael Cranish. Let's see if Michael Cranish can pull us in here for the full ride on this profile of Josh Hawley. Datelined Lexington, Missouri. Joshua Hawley was 13 years old, living comfortably as the son of a bank president, and sure, why not, when his parents gave him a book about political conservatism for Christmas. Yay, thanks. Well, anyway, I don't know. He seemed to enjoy it. Hawley became enamored with the ideology. He began writing columns for the local newspaper, which I guess also tells you something about the state of the local newspaper. He might have been a very precocious 13-year-old, but down in Lexington, Missouri, they thought, who ought to be writing a column for our paper? This 13-year-old wunderkind conservative. He began writing columns for the local newspaper that seethed with resentment. 13 years worth of resentment built up in 13-year-old Joshua Hawley. life, right from the socialism of having been fed by his parents to the, I don't know, everyday existence of continuing to be fed and housed by his parents at that time. Anyway, he seethed with resentment against who? The political power structure. Yeah, damn them. They made my dad a bank president. Even domestic terrorist Timothy McVeigh's bombing of a federal building, killing 168 people, sparked him to speak up for groups that express anger toward the government. He was an anti-government activist in the vein of Timothy McVeigh, even at the tender age of 13. Try him as an adult, I say. Anyway, many of the people who populate these movements, he wrote, are not radical right-wing pro-assault weapons freaks, as they were stereotyped in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, he wrote. 26 years later, those far-right rumblings reached a crescendo during another deadly attack on a federal building, this time with Hawley at the center of the action. As a U.S. Senator, Hawley had led the charge to object to the 2020 election on the false premise that some states failed to follow the law, bolstering the baseless claims of President Donald Trump that the election was stolen and should be overturned. Hawley said that the ascent of Joe Biden to the presidency, quote, depends on what would happen on January 6th, the day of the pro forma congressional vote to affirm the election. He had been photographed that day, pumping his fist in the air at some Trump supporters who were gathering on the grounds outside the U.S. Capitol. And we've missed the word who in this, editors, so it's one of your big splashy pieces with like a big interactive type photo. That is to say, the photo isn't interactive. It's so big and you have to scroll so far to get past it and start the story up that there's so much interference going on that this must be one of those stories that newspaper editors, multimedia editors, like to call interactive. Even though there's no interaction. It's you interacting with the screen going, God damn it, get this photo out of the way. I want to read the article. That's the interaction you have. All right, so you get the idea here. And I don't know. It might be of interest to read all the way through, but it feels like it might consume the entirety of the show if we did that. And look, we know that Josh Hawley is a jerk-ass. We can get to the particulars of why and to whom he has been a jerk-ass in his distant past, perhaps sometime in the future, as those of you on Twitter digest the article and pull out the really, really nasty bits and share them with us. All right, let's see. We will check in on a couple of other morning issues. I note for the record as well, something I retweeted earlier this morning, and I hadn't noticed until somebody called it out here. It was Amer Madhani, who is Amer? Amer is the White House reporter for AP, and he points out this morning that this is the first time in nearly a year, he provides a photo of it, first time in nearly a year that people can enjoy Lafayette Square and get the head-on view of the White House, like it used to be before Donald Trump put up, 3, 5, 15 rings of security walls and fencing around the White House, probably because he knew very well that by rights he should have seen the White House ransacked and been dragged out by the people and, well, probably eaten by wolves at that point. But that wouldn't be our doing. That would be the wolves acting of their own volition. They're very hungry. I don't know why they're even here in D.C. We just wanted to have a nice chat with the guy and maybe a hint darkly that his sushi had been spit on, but the wolves did what they did. It's not my fault. Anyway, I guess all that wall is gone now because there's a popular president in the White House, and he realizes that this thing is a disgusting scar across the face of Washington, D.C. By the way, there were all those rings of walls put up by, wasn't it Trump who launched the initiative that said that American official architecture needed to be beautiful and inspiring and et cetera, and there was something about American exceptionalism and our beautiful architecture and these disgusting walls. He's building walls all over the place, this guy. All right, let's see. What other things did we have tucked away in pocket? There were a couple things that we read part of yesterday that also need further digestion, but we'll wait on those and get to a couple other things that we can at least put on the record and share with you. This, I think, is an important update to the Russian bounty story. Important because we skipped, I think, the last important update to the Russian bounty story. You remember, of course, this was the story that the intelligence services, American intelligence services, had concluded that there was at least a strong likelihood. I don't remember how they put it exactly, but they believed that the Russians were offering bounties for the killing of American service personnel in Afghanistan. You remember this. And, of course, there was a great uproar about it, and then a great uproar about the fact that Donald Trump, then President of the United States, allegedly, would do nothing about it and would confront the Russians about it in no way whatsoever. And then, fairly recently, I think there was a round of reporting, I guess, calling that into question at some level. And Republicans seized on it briefly, but then lost track of it because Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, I guess, but pushing back on that and questioning that conclusion. And before we ever really got to even acknowledge that, it's taken another turn and been more or less reaffirmed. The New York Times reporting Russian spy team left traces that bolstered CIA's bounty judgment. But, the subheader reminds us, the U.S. lacked, quote, evidence that the Kremlin directed this operation, unquote. Newly declassified information about the Russian team showed. So they could have been rogue actors from, outside of Kremlin circles. Or they could have been entirely under the direction of the Kremlin, but failed to leave behind evidence for us to discover that would definitively make that link for us. Instead, we are left to guess. All right, let's take a look at the reporting here by Charlie Savage, Eric Schmidt, and Michael Schwartz. I don't think I recognize Michael Schwartz's name, but we'll add it to the, our circle of trust. It's Charlie Savage, of course, a name I've been calling out for quite a long time. Eric Schmidt, longtime New York Times reporter. Michael Schwartz may be longer than all of them in his tenure, for all I know, but then they tend to go first. So, all right, maybe he's the new guy and I haven't noticed. Or maybe it's been 10 years and I haven't noticed. In early 2020, members of a Taliban-linked criminal network in Afghanistan, detained in raids, told interrogators that they had heard that Russians were offering money to reward killings of Americans and coalition troops. And put that way, I guess, and it was put that way on purpose, it does make it sound like, well, it could be less than reliable. Why, they're members of a Taliban-linked criminal network. That doesn't sound like nice, reliable people at all. The claim that Russia was trying to pay to generate more frequent attacks on Western forces was stunning, particularly because the United States was trying at the same time to negotiate a deal with the Taliban to end the long-running war in Afghanistan. And that included, I don't know if it was about the same time or not, but you may recall that it included Donald Trump's idea that it would be wise and desirable to invite Taliban negotiators to Camp David to talk things out. Though that didn't, I don't think, come to fruition. Back to the story. CIA analysts set out to see whether they could corroborate or debunk the detainees' accounts. Ultimately, newly declassified information shows those analysts discovered a significant reason to believe the claim was accurate. Other members of the same Taliban-linked network had been working closely with operatives from a notorious unit of the GRU, the Russian military intelligence service known for assassination operations. I don't know if you want to get that reputation. I mean, they probably did, but you don't. The involvement of this GRU unit is consistent with Russia encouraging attacks against U.S. and coalition personnel in Afghanistan, given its leading role in such lethal and destabilizing operations abroad. The National Security Council said in a statement provided to the New York Times The statement was originally drafted and declassified to serve as talking points for officials to use in briefing reports last month about U.S. sanctions and other punishments against Russia. The White House took diplomatic action, delivering a warning and demanding an explanation for suspicious activities about the bounty issue, but did not base sanctions on it. The Biden administration did impose sanctions for Russia's SolarWinds hacking and election interference. In briefing reporters, a senior administration official noted that the intelligence community had assessed with low to moderate confidence that Russia had offered bounties. And maybe that was the revision in the middle that I was thinking of. Skipped over the official rather, focusing on other complex issues, skipped over most of the newly declassified information that had been prepared to explain what the government knew about the bounty issue. Afterward, some commentators treated the bare line about confidence levels as a new development. Aha, that explains what's going on here. That amounted to the government walking back its suspicions from 2020. This is what I remember. But I guess Charlie Savage sees it slightly differently. But the Times had reported last summer that different intelligence agencies, while agreeing on the assessment itself, disagreed on whether to put a medium or lower confidence on it. I see what you mean. The evidence available to analysts, both alarming facts and frustrating gaps, essentially remains the same. The release of the full talking points as a statement is the government's most detailed public explanation yet about how the CIA came to the judgment that Russia had most likely offered financial incentives to reward attacks on American and Allied troops. It also shed new light on the gaps in the evidence that raised greater concerns among other analysts. So I guess we get a clearer picture of just what was going on internally now. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, it's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, I just realized that I don't think I put aside all of the discussion about the housing prices in New York. And even though 50,000 people were retweeting that this morning, not quite. For some reason, now I can't come up with the actual discussion. But okay, all right, I found it now. I'll use Dave Weigel's tweet of it rather than Armando's. But Armando gets an honorable mention for having brought the issue to my attention. I'm interested in finding out a little bit more about what was going on with the bounties, and so we'll continue with that article, at least for a little while, before jumping off into other issues, just to get more things on the record. In the world of intelligence analysis, the New York Times continues, moderate confidence. I'm curious about this. Why apparently the whole apparent walkback was really over revelations, you'll recall, of some disagreement in the intelligence community as to whether to hang moderate or low confidence as a tag on the intelligence that they were hearing that Russia was offering bounties. So here's what the argument was about. In intelligence circles, moderate confidence means that the judgment was based on information deemed to be credibly sourced and plausible. Low confidence flags significant concerns about the quality of the sourcing underlying a judgment. And I guess you might ask, why do we pass on intelligence in which we have low confidence? And I guess the answer is you don't want to miss anything. I don't have a great deal of confidence, perhaps, in, well, again, like the intelligence came from members of a Taliban-linked criminal network. Like, for one thing, you say, well, that person's a part of a criminal network. Why, we shouldn't give any credence to his intelligence at all, you might say, if you were from the, I don't know, 1940s or something like that. But you might also say, well, he could be telling the truth. He might be in a position to know about these things. And you might say, moderate, low, I don't know. And then you say, well, he's a Taliban-linked criminal network guy. So really, like a Taliban-linked, Boy Scout that would be unusual. But you'd still say, I don't know, Boy Scout, yes, Taliban-linked, no. Whereas here you say, I don't know, criminal network, no, but also Taliban, more no. So I guess that's like low confidence. But, I don't know, for reasons that are perhaps known best to intelligence operatives, they might say, well, there are a lot of scumbags who might know about the very scumbaggish things that are going on in Afghanistan. They are, after all, the people perpetrating them. So they might be right, but they also could be liars. So low confidence. We'll give you this information. Could turn out to be true, not just because this guy says it, though. Whereas if, let's say, a Taliban-linked good humor man had said it was going on, you might say, well, Taliban-linked, no, but, good humor, I mean, that's good stuff, right? Ice cream, helping kids, I don't know, doesn't really help kids, it takes all their allowance money, whatever, but delicious. So therefore, and good is right in the name. If it was, meh humor, I don't know what to make of this guy. Maybe that is low confidence, but I see the point. All right, so where were we in this? Right. In the case of the bounty intelligence, officials have said the surveillance-focused National Security Agency more sharply discounted its confidence in the assessment to low because of a key gap. And it's not because Taliban-linked or anything. I guess they'll take their word for anything. It had not intercepted any smoking gun electronic communications on a bounty plot, and that's their job, and they hadn't heard anything, so they had low confidence in it. The Defense Intelligence Agency shares that view, as it happens, while the National Counterterrorism Center agrees with the CIA, which says they were going to give it moderate levels of confidence. But the statement, the newly declassified one, the talking points, reveals that despite the disagreement over how to rate the quality of available information underlying the core assessment, this is good nuance, the intelligence community also had high confidence, which has its own meaning. That means that the judgment is based on high quality information from multiple sources. It had high confidence in key circumstantial evidence. And I know a lot of people, maybe from learning it on TV, come to the understanding that circumstantial evidence is poor evidence, but that's not what circumstantial means at all. But anyway, the CIA had key circumstantial evidence. Strong ties existed between Russian operatives and the Afghan network where the bounty claims arose. In other words, the Taliban-linked criminals, they had strong ties with Russian operatives, because Russian operatives very often criminal networks themselves, and birds of a feather, even in Afghanistan, flock together, apparently. We have independently verified the ties of several individuals in this network to Russia. The National Security Council statement said, it added, multiple sources have confirmed that elements of this criminal network worked for Russian intelligence for over a decade and traveled to Moscow in April of 2019. Like Ron Johnson, who waited for July, I think. Anyway, the classified, or rather declassified statement also opened a window into American officials' understanding of the Russian operatives, known as Unit 29155 of the GRU. The government has previously resisted talking openly about the group, although a Times investigation in 2019 linked it to various operations, citing Western security officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. I wonder what kind of operations. By contrast, the National Security Council statement identified other, quote, nefarious operations around the world that the government thought the squad had carried out. Not the squad in Congress with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They're not doing that. Though they would be badass if they could. I don't know. Anyway, not the part about killing American soldiers, of course. Doing it to the other side. But they wouldn't do that. You get the idea. Anyway, probably a bad idea to say that the squad carried it out. But the squad, in this case, Unit 29155 of the GRU. So, let's see. The National Security Council statement identified other nefarious operations around the world that they thought these guys had carried out to explain why the discovery of its involvement with the Afghan network was seen as bolstering the credibility of the detainees' claims about Russian bounties. Charlie Savage, I think, particularly good at explaining the connective tissue in all of this. And, I was wondering about whether or not this was their doing, and it is. We have a strong body, here it comes, ready? We have a strong body of evidence of the activities of this GRU unit, the statement said, accusing it of a plot to violently disrupt Montenegro's legislative elections in 2016. That's rather obscure. I don't think I know very much about that one, but what about this one? Also of the 2018 poisoning of a former GRU officer, Sergei Skripal, in Salisbury, England, and of assassinations across Europe. Not a much less successful charity album effort than, say, Hands Across America. Assassinations across Europe, not getting a lot of support. The American government's decision to declassify intelligence about Unit 29155 for public discussion came as 2 European countries publicly raised suspicions recently that the unit was responsible for sabotage operations on their soil. In mid-April, the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, they are everywhere, these guys. Prime Minister of the Czech Republic said there was clear evidence assembled by intelligence and security services there, establishing reasonable suspicion that Unit 29155 was involved in 2 explosions at ammunition depots that killed 2 Czechs in 2014. He said the government would expel nearly 80 Russian diplomats. Days later, the Prosecutor General's office in Bulgaria announced that it was investigating a possible connection between Unit 29155 and 4 explosions at ammunition depots over the past decade. At least 2 happened while members of the unit were frequently traveling in and out of Bulgaria, the office said. By the way, the Czech Republic and Bulgaria both having still having tremendous coronavirus problems, sitting at the top of the lists of countries reporting new cases by million in population for some time now. Some of the destroyed arms in both countries, according to officials, belonged to Emilian Gebrev, perhaps, a Bulgarian arms manufacturer who was poisoned in 2015 and also fell out of a window in Kyiv, probably. Poisoned in 2015 along with his son and an executive in his company. Officials have previously accused Unit 29155 of that attempted assassination. While most previous reports about Unit 29155's activities have centered in Europe, its leader, Major General Andrei V. Averyanov, my best guess, has experience in Central Asia. He graduated in 1988 from the Tashkent Military Academy in what was then the Soviet Republic of Uzbekistan, a year before the Soviet pullout from bordering Afghanistan. The government apparently did not declassify everything. The White House statement described but did not detail certain evidence, keeping its sources and methods of information gathering secret. It did not specify the GRU unit's number, but officials have said it was Unit 29155, and the 2 prior operations the statement mentioned have been attributed to it elsewhere. The White House also did not identify the members of the Afghan network it accused of direct interactions with the unit. I guess we need a smaller more compact name for Unit 29155. 3 officials have previously named them as Ramatullah Azizi. No, Ramatullah, I'm going to guess. Ramatullah Azizi, a one-time drug smuggler. I guess that means he used to be. It's not like, I only did it one time. I smuggled these drugs. A one-time drug smuggler who grew wealthy as a middleman for the Russian spies, and Habib Muradi. Both escaped capture and are said to have fled to Russia, which I think is a good clue. And it made no mention of other circumstantial evidence officials have previously described, like the discovery that money was transferred from a GRU account to the Afghan network. I guess, again, these Taliban-linked criminal network. In an interview published April 30th in a Russian newspaper, Nikolai Patrushev, the chairman of Russia's Security Council, again said it was false that Russia had covertly offered bounties for killing American troops in Afghanistan, adding that there was no evidence that it had done so. The White House statement also brought into sharper focus 2 gaps in the available evidence that analysts saw as a reason to be cautious. Military leaders have repeatedly pointed to one in public. The intelligence community lacks proof tying any specific attack to a bounty payment. Can't confirm that the operation resulted in any actual attacks. And the other reason for caution is an absence of information showing that a Kremlin leader authorized this unit to offer bounties to Afghan militants. We don't have evidence of that either. The Biden administration's briefing to reporters last month reignited a debate over the political implications of the CIA's assessment and the Trump's White House's handling of it. That unfolded last year and dwelled in part on confidence levels. The Times reported last June on the existence of the CIA assessment that the White House had led an interagency effort to come up with options to respond, but then authorized none. Facing bipartisan criticism, the Trump administration defended its inaction by playing down the assessment as too weak to take seriously, falsely denying that it had been briefed to President Trump. In fact, it had been included in his written presidential daily briefing in late February, 2 officials have said, which of course you all know means he didn't know anything about it. In congressional testimony, military leaders based in the U.S. who regularly interacted with the Trump White House said they would be outraged if it were true, but they had not seen proof that any attack resulted from bounties. But some military officials based in Afghanistan, as well as some other senior Pentagon and State Department officials, thought the CIA was right, according to officials familiar with the internal deliberations at the time. Among those who found the evidence and analysis persuasive was Nathan Sales, the State Department's politically appointed top counterterrorism official during the Trump administration. The reporting that Russia was placing bounties on American soldiers' heads was so serious that it warranted a robust diplomatic response, Mr. Sales said this week in an email. The top Pentagon official and Secretary of State at the time, Mike Pompeo, heard of that guy? Later delivered warnings over the issue to their Russian counterparts, effectively breaking with the White House. After the briefing last month, some Trump supporters, as well as some left-wing critics of the CIA and military interventions, argued that the CIA's bounty assessment had been debunked as evidence-free fake news, vindicating Trump's dismissal of the issue last year as a hoax. Russian propaganda outlets echoed and amplified those assertions. Michael J. Morrell, a former acting director of the CIA, said another factor had fostered confusion. When analysts assess something with low confidence, he said, that does not mean they think the conclusion is wrong. Rather, they are expressing greater concerns about the sourcing limitations while still judging that the assessment is the best explanation of the available facts. That's important, I think. A judgment at any confidence level is a judgment that the analysts believe to be true, he said. Even when you have a judgment that is low confidence, the analysts believe that judgment is correct. So in this case, the analysts believe that the Russians were offering bounties. Okay. So there you go. I think that actually helps clarify where we stand at this point, because I did come away with the impression, without reading all the way up on it, during the last round of revisions, I guess, and revisionist reporting about it. Well, revisionist might be unfair. But anyway, I came away with the impression that they were walking back from the assessment, and in fact, they were not. So I find that interesting, and maybe you would agree that it's worth discussing. All right, let's see. How about this? A thread forwarded to me by one of you good friends of the show, from Hold Them Accountable. It's a direct. It's a direct note here from. That's the new screen ID of Lisa Iannucci's Twitter account. You know how people can change the screen name of it, but the address remains the same, so I didn't recognize it right off the bat. It's a good idea. Why not change your screen name to Hold Them Accountable? All right, Lisa, what do you have for us here? You directly shared with Greg and I both here a great thread from someone entirely different from Lisa on Elise Stefanik and her political history. This could become important, as I understand the vote, such as it is, to be held tomorrow on removing Liz Cheney from her Republican conference post, and the current thinking is that it will be Elise Stefanik who steps into that role, as ridiculous as that might seem. The Twitter thread is from Brian Mann, reporter for NPR, on issues relating to addiction, of all things, but maybe his coverage of the issue in upstate New York is what brought him to this realization of our understanding of the background of Elise Stefanik. And he begins this way: for 6+ years, I covered Elise Stefanik as closely as any journalist, following her through rural upstate Adirondack towns in her congressional district, New York's 21st, watching her build political strength, visiting her in Washington, D.C., etc. And here are my takeaways. Brian continues here. In 2014, she presented herself as a moderate, and her past career suggested as much, including her writings at Harvard, yay, and her work with Democrats like Senator Shaheen. And here included is a linked article from northcountrypublicradio.org, What Elise Stefanik's Harvard Writings Tell Us About Her Politics. We might want to check in on that. But Brian, I think, is digesting things for us in this thread. She also worked closely early in her career, with moderates and people who've emerged as never-Trumpers, such as Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, and Bill Kristol, including a stint in the Bush-Cheney White House, which, of course, gives us no confidence in her whatsoever, but you get the idea of where she was coming from. But lots of those people have flipped. Our reporting found Elise Stefanik had a remarkable resume in 2014 and a strong track record working in Washington, D.C., not the typical resume for someone seeking an upstate New York House seat. And here again, included from North Country Public Radio, another profile of her. Reporting at North Country Public Radio found, however, that she was eager to downplay her D.C. cred and her identity as a political insider. She claimed to have grown up in a rural Adirondacks community in New York's 21st district, but I couldn't find anyone there who knew her. And of course, you know, the benefit of claiming to have grown up in such a town is that you can walk around and say, why, I come from one of these small, tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone else and something, and yet somehow, for some reason, it doesn't take a village to raise a child around here, even though it really does, and that's exactly what we're saying when we talk about small, tight-knit communities, but because Hillary Clinton said it, we don't agree with that assessment anymore. You get the idea. So, I recall vaguely that there was some discussion of her not really, having the local cred that she said she did. This North Country Public Radio piece that's attached to this tweet is New York 21. Is Elise Stefanik a fresh new voice or a carpetbagger? I think I'd be interested in reading that. Maybe you would be too. Brian continues, however, we also saw quickly that Elise Stefanik was a skilled campaigner, disciplined, dogged, fierce. She got better and better, dismantling Republican and Democratic challengers. Stefanik made it clear that she wanted a national profile in the Republican Party, but her rise was complicated by the victory of Donald Trump in 2016. At first, she was wary of Trump, criticizing him often, but in careful ways. This, again, illustrated by another North Country Public Radio piece, Timeline. Representative Stefanik often sharply critical of Trump, but backs his, what are we looking at here? Backs his agenda. Okay. And yet more here, Brian continues. During the Trump years, however, Stefanik executed a complete pivot, embracing Trump, using the impeachment to build her national profile. That's where I remember her coming from. Securing more Fox News appearances and endorsing him fully in 2020. By this point, Stefanik was fully branded as a Trump ally. She secured this position more fully by embracing and amplifying Trump's lies about the election and downplaying his role in the January 6th insurrection. Another of the North Country Public Radio pieces here, titled, Here Are the Questions Stefanik Needs to Answer About This Historic Moment. So they're really putting her on the spot there. Continuing with Brian's thread, throughout the process, Elise Stefanik showed steady ambition, an ability to adapt and evolve her politics, and a willingness to shed old loyalties and allies while amplifying factual untruths when necessary. Her brand may be a perfect match for the modern GQP. I'll call it the GQP. He doesn't, but why not? And finally, he concludes that former President Trump clearly thinks that this is the case. While condemning Liz Cheney for speaking accurately about Trump's behavior in the build-up to the January 6th insurrection, Trump has embraced Stefanik as the right choice for House Republican leadership. And, well, Greg agrees with the quality of the assessment. He's the very next one here, putting this in a thread reader roll-up for us to read as well. So thanks to Lisa for spotting that one, and for Greg for making it easy for you to take away the thread and read it elsewhere. Let's see. I don't know whether this is the case or not, but we happen to notice the comment of Bill McKibben chiming in on this one, saying, good summary. Wasn't she maskless at the Trump Tulsa campaign rally, the one that killed Herman Cain? That'd be a good call. I don't know if that was the case, but you might have a memory of that. Also worth noting that when people came to her office to say, discuss immigration, she has them arrested. And this illustrated by a New Yorker piece claiming, well, just that. And see if there's any of the replies here. Does anybody say, no, that wasn't her at the Tulsa rally? No one makes that claim. So, interesting. I'd like to look perhaps more deeply into that. And maybe I'll spend some time poking in on the article questioning whether she was a fresh new voice or a carpetbagger sometime soon. All right. Just a few minutes left before the top of the hour. Don't know what we can fit in there that will make it in just a few minutes, but I'm curious. I'm just going to scroll back a little bit in Pocket and see what we might share with others. Here's a perfect little story, I guess. Short enough that I can fit it in there. Anyway, a comment that I made. Why did we do this? I can't remember exactly what it was that prompted this, but a thought that occurred to me the other night, I guess the end of last week, that, was this related to something in particular? I can't really remember, but I don't know. I must have been thinking about the many ways in which Trump's responses to the COVID crisis were, basically criminal in nature. But I was thinking about his fake recovery, or faking having COVID, or I guess just I must have been compiling my nightly stats on how many people have died since he promised he was going to save everybody in America with Regeneron products. And I continue to get pushback on that from people who say, well, I understand if you actually know where to push the right buttons and pull the right levers, you can actually get the stuff and get it for free. But as I keep reminding everybody, that's sort of a far cry, a very far cry from, to say, well, if you're enterprising and know where to go and have an inside tip, you can probably manage to find a way to locate some of this stuff and get it, especially if, from all reports, there's a very small, short, and critical window in which you're supposed to be treated with the stuff in order for it to be effective. And you waste all of that window searching around for how do I get the stuff. It's a far cry from, I'm going to give it to everybody in America for free, every vulnerable senior. I even saw some people claim that he at some point had said, I'm going to use the military to deliver it to you all. You just sit at home and the military will parachute this stuff into your house. That's a quite different story. But anyway, what it reminded me of was the fact that I was thinking about Ronnie Jackson, whom you all know as the White House doctor, the White House physician, who was, most famous, I think, for being willing to lie about Trump's height and weight so that he didn't have to declare him, it didn't have to pull him into the obese category. Great favor to Donald Trump, and he never forgot it, and so ended up lavishing all sorts of praise on Jackson and essentially rewarded him with an endorsement for a race for a seat in Congress in Texas. And so now Ronnie Jackson, the doctor who was willing to lie about Trump's height and weight so as not to embarrass him, is sitting in Congress right now, screwing up everybody else's life. So that was the reward for being loyal to Donald Trump there by lying and sparing him embarrassment. And I was wondering, we all know Ronnie Jackson and his name. Does anybody know, without Googling, the names of the doctors at Walter Reed who actually saved Trump's life when he caught COVID? Because he hasn't rewarded them with anything. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, so I'll bet you that he doesn't feel any particular sense of loyalty for whatever reason to the doctors who saved his life when he supposedly, people still do doubt that, caught COVID and they pumped him full of steroids and Regeneron and remdesivir and everything else that they could get their hands on, mostly at his insistence. And maybe that's why he doesn't feel like they really saved his life. I saved my own life. I know better than these doctors. Or it could be that he's angry at them for letting it be known in public somehow that they didn't think it was a good idea for him to go out for a joyride in the limousine to wave at people with Trump flags who were holding a vigil of sorts outside Walter Reed. Well, he was there. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I mean, Mr. effing Loyalty has nothing to say about it. There's no famous doctors at Walter Reed running for Congress or doing anything else. And again, that too may be just we're, interested in being doctors and nothing else. It's a pretty good gig. We're enjoying it and happy to stay here and help people. Whereas Ronnie Jackson needed to move on to the next thing as soon as possible. And we were just in a different situation. But I find it interesting. On the Elise Stefanik front, this note from live listener Adkaratic. Am I getting the pronunciation of it correct? That's the Twitter handle you'll find making this comment. But the screen name, once again, confounding all, as people love to make topical and timely jokes. And sometimes I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. It's ground-based counterflow virtual impactor is the current screen name for Adkaratic. But the comment here reads thus with the KITM hashtag, if you want to find it that way. If I recall correctly, during one speech after the impeachment, Trump couldn't correctly remember Stefanik's name. And I guess must have called her Elaine. I don't know whether he got the Stefanik part correct or not, but at least changed to Elaine, and he probably then used the excuse, as the joke goes here. You could also call her Elaine, so I've been told. So we'll see. Let's see other important news. Oh, well, this actually has to do with Virginia, I guess. As it turns out, this is interesting. All eyes, except mine, were on the race for the Republican nomination for governor here in Virginia, mostly because there were innumerable lunatics running in the race, and maybe nobody normal. I really don't know who was running for governor on the Republican side, with the exception of Amanda Chase, who was the most famous of the pro-Trump lunatics joining the race. And as a result, of course, things were chaotic in the Republican Party here in Virginia, and they came up with some kooky version of kooky methodology for choosing their nominee that lay somewhere between primary and convention. And of course, we're still not really ready to get people together in a convention, so in person, because COVID, which is a hoax, etc. And anyway, they had some sort of thing, and it took them days to figure out who had won. And I don't know whether there's still a question on the nomination for Attorney General or not, but that was in question for a while as well. And anyway, and lots of good commentary. It was quite right to say the Republicans, of course, had spent the previous couple of months insisting that the results of any election could and should be known in a matter of hours, and that anything beyond a couple of hours was itself prima facie evidence of massive voter fraud from Democrats. But it's just so hard to get Democrats to commit massive voter fraud in Republican primaries. They usually wait, of course, for the general election to perpetrate their massive election fraud. So what was the explanation for taking so long in figuring out who got the nomination? Well, if you won the nomination, the answer was meticulous care to make sure that the correct result obtained and that the people of Virginia were heard. If you lost, it was, of course, evidence of massive voter fraud by Republican establishment looking to keep you out of the seat of power that was naturally supposed to devolve to you because you're you. Anyway, Amanda Chase, which was everybody's, I think, greatest fear, did not win. And instead, everybody's new greatest fear will, I guess, become Glenn Youngkin, of whom I have never heard. But I live here in Virginia, but I try very hard not to pay any attention to Republican politics here. And luckily, we've been able to ignore them for quite some time because Democrats have been winning this seat. But now we have to worry. The news here, the news hook is that Donald Trump has weighed in from Spider-Hole Lago and endorsed Youngkin now that he's won. He didn't have anything to say when the contest was up in the air, but he hung back and waited, and Youngkin won. Now he says, "Congratulations to Glenn Youngkin." I'm sure he could have made them say, "Congratulations to Dunkin' Donuts, who has been nominated for governor of Viagra." And I hope, all right, well, anyway. Congratulations, somebody told him the guy's name was Glenn Youngkin, for winning the Republican nomination for governor of Virginia. Glenn is pro-business, wow, pro-Second Amendment, holy mackerel, pro-veterans, pro-America, and he knows how to make Virginia's economy rip-roaring. That's a good one, rip-roaring. And he has my, this is the Trump part. There's some stray capitalization here. He has my complete and total endorsement, capitalized there. Glenn is not all caps, just, capitalize the word complete, total, and endorsement. Glenn is running against Bill Clinton's longtime enabler, Terry McAuliffe, which hasn't been settled yet, but they've decided that that's important to them. Then the rest of it is McAuliffe bashing. So he may know nothing whatsoever about Glenn Youngkin. I don't see why he would. Something, blah, blah, blah. By the way, a Chinese Communist Party mentioned in here. Virginia doesn't need the Clintons or the Communist Chinese running the state. That's true. We have it under control. as far as I know. But any communist Chinese come around here trying to be governor, I'm going to say no. So say no to them, say no to Terry McAuliffe, and yes, say yes to Patriot Glenn Youngkin, who we all know and love. All right. So there you have it, from the desk of Donald Trump, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. That's news. That passes for news here in Virginia. There's a couple of other bits and pieces. We can maybe move on to another story of interest and wait and see whether it happens when we roll the dice on Joan. I think she's probably well aware and listening, will give me some signal at some point to make me stop saying anything like maybe she won't show up. I'm just hedging my bets is all. All right, let's see. This a tweet from diplomacy and national security reporter at Foreign Policy, Robbie Gramer, who tweets this fun and exciting news. Joe Biden has a new nominee for ambassador to Japan. Who is it going to be? And the answer is, for some reason, Rahm Emanuel. Well, it's maybe not the most disastrous thing in the world for the guy to be ambassador to Japan. And I'm sure at some level he wanted something important. It's important to him to look like he has the ear of the president. But, I don't know whether it was the president himself or the political operation who said, bringing him back inside the White House at this point, probably not good for us as a public relations issue. And also, if you've been chief of staff of the White House, if you're not coming in as president or vice president, or I don't know, maybe a very few other positions that you can think of, if you're then it's a demotion from having been chief of staff. So they're not going to interest him in anything else. So he probably, you want a vacation. Where to? Japan? You like Japan? All right. You can be ambassador to Japan. I probably wouldn't pick it, but that's because I haven't been to Japan. Maybe it would change my mind if I had spent some time there. All right. Well, anyway, that's news. I don't, what can I tell you? I don't even worry about the people of Japan. They're not, maybe they'll be insulted by him on purpose or accidentally. We'll see. But good luck to everybody there, and it doesn't matter very much to me. And that's about as good a place as you can store Rahm Emanuel, as far as I'm concerned. He's overseas, in a place where, what the hell, there's not too much you can do. You can insult them, but there's nothing you can do to destroy the relationship, I don't think. Don't try or anything, Rom. I'm just saying you're probably pretty good. And not going to really have that much influence over policy, I guess, although he'll try to insinuate himself into, trade policy at some point. Okay. What else have we got here? Taking a look around here at, okay, so Kristen Sinema is at it again, something about how the filibuster is a great thing. We'll skip that for now. Joan says she's on target and ready to do it, so I don't know whether this means that she might have forgotten or not, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be fine. So good. That's good news. We can look forward to that segment later on. Take your time, Joan. It's fine. No problem. Let's share a couple other stories. There was something yesterday that I saw. Now I have to go and try and find it again and remind myself of it, that I thought we might discuss. But, damned if I can remember what it was. I should have made a note for myself. But you know how I am about writing. There it is. I've got it. Note to self. Find it over there. Maybe I'll open it up and keep it open and see if that catches my eye later on. Or I guess I should drop a hint, maybe, and said, a write-up in the Volokh conspiracy, which I guess has now moved under the umbrella of Reason magazine's website at reason.com, which gives me reason to not want to read it. But anyway, Democrats learned to love the Congressional Review Act. We discussed that some time ago and wondered whether there would be any further action and whether we would be repealing any particularly egregious Trump-era regulations under the Congressional Review Act. And I guess we have, and it's something we can discuss, perhaps, if it's of interest to her later on. Let's see, what other things can we bring to the fore before we move on to that. Let's see. There's been here's one. I guess also a good setup piece that I put aside that I guess I just wasn't sure what was so interesting about it to Steve Bannon, who I thought would have been followed. I don't know. Let's see. Steve Bannon writing for the MSNBC site here. Democrats eye a creative approach to passing immigration reform. Interesting topic, and I guess this must have been addressed on the Rachel Maddow show, if Steve Bannon's writing about it. What if Democrats could circumvent a GOP filibuster on immigration by using the budget reconciliation process? The gambit is clearly on the table. I guess what's new here is a reminder that, once again, they're still thinking of using a second, third, fourth, 15th reconciliation bill to get a lot of things done. How you shoehorn immigration into reconciliation is a bit of a mystery to me, but apparently it's been done before, even if it's not necessarily the same approach we were thinking of taking now. So let's see what's up. Steve Bannon, again, writing this back on May 4th. Congressional Democrats and the Biden White House have made no secret of their interest in passing a sweeping immigration reform package. Among the biggest hurdles, of course, is the same obstacle to passing nearly all legislation, the filibuster. We'll just put it that way. But what if the Democratic majority could circumvent a GOP filibuster by using budget reconciliation, the same method the party used to pass the COVID relief package? Well, what if? In early April, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggested Dems are prepared to do exactly that. 2 weeks later, a group of Hispanic lawmakers met privately with President Biden, and after the discussion, Representative Darren Soto of Florida told Politico that Biden told the group that he generally supports passing certain immigration reforms by reconciliation if we can't get the 10 necessary Republican votes in the Senate. Last week, Senator Patty Murray, the number 3 Democrat in the Senate leadership, raised a few eyebrows with a press release in which she said, "After years of working to reach an agreement on a solution, it's clear to me we can't miss the opportunity to act in this critical moment. We need to look at every legislative path possible to get comprehensive immigration reform done, including through reconciliation." Now, it's against this backdrop that the New York Times reported overnight that, this was last week, that Chuck Schumer is, quote, quietly considering the procedural gambit. The Times said exactly this. Mr. Schumer has privately told members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in recent weeks that he is actively exploring, that's the quote, actively exploring whether it would be possible to attach a broad revision of immigration laws to President Biden's infrastructure plan and pass it through a process known as budget reconciliation, according to 2 people briefed on his comments. And we still are at that point, we still have to say things, a process known as budget reconciliation. Still not famous enough, I guess, for even the New York Times. It's worth emphasizing, Steve continues, that this would likely be Plan B for Democratic leaders. Plan A is the ongoing negotiations process underway among a bipartisan group of 15 senators exploring the possibility of a compromise agreement. They need more senators in that bipartisan group. Unless 10 of them are Republicans and 5 are Democrats, if it's evenly split, they need more. Such a deal appears unlikely. Indeed, the Times report added that observers have watched the negotiations, quote, drag on with little agreement in sight, unquote. There's no great mystery as to why. Senator John Cornyn, one of the 15 senators involved in the bipartisan talks, one of the senators is John Cornyn, and John Cornyn is John Cornyn, and that means that if he's involved in talks that are aimed at coming to a bipartisan agreement, they won't happen. It won't happen. But that's not exactly what Steve's saying, but it's kind of what he's saying. Cornyn, one of the 15 senators involved in the talks, said, quote, "Before we can do anything meaningful on immigration, we're going to have to deal with the current crisis at the border," which actually has more or less gone away, but, they're invested in insisting it continues, even if it doesn't exist or they're not sure exactly what it is. If this seems like hollow rhetoric, it's not your imagination. For much of the last 2 decades, conservative Republicans have said there's a crisis that needs to be resolved before GOP lawmakers will consider reform legislation. And every time border security is strengthened, those same Republicans insist it's not enough. Indeed, let's not forget that GOP members promised then President Barack Obama that they'd consider a comprehensive immigration solution if he vastly improved border security. The Democrat held up his end of the bargain. The Senate passed the Gang of 8 bill, but House Republicans ended up killing the reform effort anyway, offering nothing as an alternative. The GQP position has a Zeno's paradox-like problem. There's no way to ever actually reach the point at which Republicans are satisfied that the crisis has been fully resolved. As Greg Sargent noted this morning, and again that was back on May 4th, does anybody imagine there will come a point when a Republican, or any either Republicans as a whole or any one Republican, will say, okay, Biden's totally got the border under control now, so let's get serious about working with Democrats on legalizing a lot of immigrants? Of course not. But there's an entirely different question to consider. Is it even procedurally possible to pursue immigration reform through the budget reconciliation process, which, of course, is supposed to be limited to matters of taxes and spending? I've been skeptical, but the Times report included an important detail from 16 years ago that I'd forgotten about. So let's find out what it is. The quote reads, "A team of immigration activists and researchers, as well as congressional aides, I would figure it would be multiple, is exploring the question, digging into the best way to present their case to Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough, same parliamentarian. They have, well, although, is that enclosed in, in brackets. But I guess has she been the parliamentarian for 16 years? Probably. All right, well, anyway, they have found past precedents, including one from 2005, which changes to immigration policy. Okay, so I guess this is a Times report that's current, but this detail is from 16 years ago. So McDonough may not have been parliamentarian then, but what they're saying is they are currently presenting a precedent from 16 years ago, 2005, in which changes to immigration policy were allowed as a part of a budget reconciliation package, and they are tallying up the budgetary efforts of the immigration proposals, which total in the tens of billions of dollars. Researchers have dredged up supportive quotes from Republicans from 2005 when they won sign-off for including a measure to recapture unused visas for high-skilled workers in a reconciliation package. I don't know if that's going to be directly applicable, but it's interesting. And Steve concludes, there's no shortage of unanswered questions related to process, politics, and procedure, and it'll take a while before the answers come into focus. But for now, it's clear that Democratic leaders are committed to the effort, and the door to immigration reform is not yet closed. Watch this space. So we'll be watching, and we'll see what comes of it. And it's an interesting thought, of course. It would be nice to be able to sneak something through, and I guess we'll have to do more reading about what happened in 2005 and the particulars of it to see whether we think that is something that would apply to the current situation. I am not certain about that. All right. Well, let's see. A couple other things that we can add in for discussion here. We'll see whether there's time to sneak anything else in. Let's see. Well, I think we started on this one at one point. We got a couple of minutes before the end of the segment. We'll see if we can't get a better assessment for what it was. I think I read it one Friday on the way out the door, and didn't spend a great deal of time with it over the weekend and never got back to it. It was a TPM story. The rules Dems could change to keep the Tom Cottons of the Senate from delaying Biden nominations confirmations. The subheader reading here. For now, it's just one senator threatening to hold up a small number of nominees, and I don't know where we stand on that. But if his tactic is successful at hamstringing their partisan rival, it's only a matter of time before other Republicans follow Tom Cotton's lead. Eleanor Egan writing this back on April 29th, that there were 40. That's how many of Joe Biden's nominees the Senate will have likely confirmed when his presidency crosses the 100-day mark that Friday, back at the end of April. On average, it took these nominees 49 days to move from nomination to confirmation, with over 1,100 seats throughout the executive branch left to fill, not to mention hundreds more in the judiciary. That glacial pace should worry you. Unfortunately, it can get even slower, and thanks to Senator Tom Cotton, it looks like it's about to. Earlier this month, Cotton threatened to refuse consent or time agreements for the nomination of any U.S. attorney from any state represented by a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. It's an odd combination of factors. The reason behind the threat is expectedly petty. Cotton took offense when the Judiciary Chair cut his remarks short to move the committee to a vote on Vanita Gupta's nomination for Associate Attorney General. But the content of the threat is no laughing matter. By forcing the Senate through even more procedural hoops, Cotton can single-handedly delay these nominations by days or weeks and increase the trade-off between time spent on nominations and other Senate business. If Senate Democrats do not wish to leave their agenda at the mercy of Cotton, or for that matter, any other supposedly aggrieved Republican who can deploy the same tricks, they'll have to change the rules. But first, what exactly is Cotton threatening to do, and why would it be such a problem? To understand that, let's take a brief look at how the Senate confirmation process works, at least in theory. You know probably most of this. After nominees have cleared the substantive stages of their Senate process, e.g. vetting and a committee hearing and vote, they are placed on the Senate's executive calendar to await debate and a full Senate vote. Here begins a series of delays. The full Senate cannot, for example, consider a nominee unless they have been on the executive calendar for a day. Then, invoking cloture, which places a limit on the number of hours the Senate can consider a pending matter before a vote, takes 2 days, thanks to the customary layover period between the introduction of a cloture motion and a vote on it. You know about that. This period can run concurrently for multiple nominees at once, though. And after that, there is post-cloture, quote, debate, which precedes a final vote and usually extends for 2 hours per nominee sequentially. Perhaps this was helpful in the past, but today, debate, of course, refers to senators monologuing into a mostly empty room. When you account for the Senate's short work week, frequent recesses for in-district work, and legislative demands, these days-long delays easily turn into weeks-long slowdowns. Not every nomination passes through this series of procedural hoops. Unanimous consent agreements can be used to sidestep every portion of this process. Indeed, they were for nearly a third of the nominees who have been confirmed since Biden took office, and even when, as was the case for the majority of nominees, Republicans refused unanimous consent for one portion of this process, they did not for all of its steps. In many cases, for example, Republicans forced Democrats to file cloture motions for nominees, creating a 2-day delay, but then still offered unanimous consent to allow a vote on these nominees before the maximum number of hours of debate had passed. Now, Cotton is threatening to relinquish this lingering bit of cooperation for the 16 U.S. attorney nominees for Democratic Judiciary members' home states. The resulting delays, which on paper only last a handful of days, will undoubtedly extend much longer. Besides the problem of scheduling around short weeks and recesses, there is the reality that the Senate floor time is scarce. By demanding the full 2 hours of debate for each U.S. attorney nomination, which again really means having senators monologue to the C-SPAN cameras, Cotton can ensure that only a couple of nominations were approved in any given day and create a choke point that slows everything else that comes after. It will also, critically, increase the trade-off between time spent on nominations and time spent on everything else that the Senate has on its agenda. That means that, for example, having a U.S. attorney for Georgia who is actively working to advance Joe Biden's criminal justice reform agenda will come at the cost of delays to the infrastructure package. The country and the planet cannot afford these trade-offs. For now, it's just one senator threatening to do this. Of course, it's only a matter of time before other Republicans can follow Cotton's lead. So what do we have on the table to do about it? I guess we can perhaps poke into that if Joan has an interest in it, but we may head in a completely different direction after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is here with us after a nice vacation, I hope. Are you well rested, Joan?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Well, okay. Mostly.
Okay. Well, you got some additional.
I was driving a car full of octogenarians and near octogenarians around for a week, and only one of them chooses to wear hearing aids. So,
okay.
So yeah, much of it was loud and confusing.
Yeah, maybe, but well, all right. Well,
it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Good. Okay.
Really good to be able to see family.
Very nice. Everybody vaccinated, so now you can do that.
Everybody vaccinated. It was safe, and it was really, really nice.
Right. Okay. Did you have to tell them, don't make me turn this car around at any point?
There was a point or two, yes.
All right,
and I learned a critical lesson.
Yeah. Okay.
When you are giving your dog a shot of insulin, make sure you're wearing your glasses.
Okay.
Because when you go to put the cap back on the used needle, you might miss and jab yourself in the finger and end up in urgent care at the beach needing an antibiotic.
Wow. Yeah, I guess. Okay. Well, they have those urgent cares there at the beach for you.
But, that was the worst of what happened, so we were pretty lucky.
Yeah, I guess it could be worse, but it's not a good one. But
and it made me curious how many urgent care visits are because somebody forgot to wear their glasses.
Huh. Yeah. Well, you need an urgent care LASIK, I guess, and eliminate the need for I don't know. That's been 20, 30 years on the market, and I still don't believe it. So
I swear by it, it works.
Yeah? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, might be time to go and do that then.
The glasses are because I'm an old person and I can't see close up anymore.
Oh, okay. So all right. Well, all right. Maybe I'll trust it after all. I heard it changes your DNA. I'm not going to. Whatever excuse I can come up with. Okay. Well, I was reading before the break. I don't know if that interests you in particular, but I was reading before the break about Tom Cotton delaying things with all of these nominations. And scanning ahead, I mean, there's no secret, as it turns out, to what the solution would be. And it comes down to, well, you could change the rules by using the nuclear option. And there are some small bore rules changes that could be made, but essentially they're saying it's no new invention. It would be gathering up 50 votes and holding them together and breaking the tie if necessary. And I guess there's some possibility that you might be able to convince Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin that this isn't eliminating the filibuster, it's simply doing some other thing. the article went on to mention that back in 2013, I think they came to a temporary agreement that ended up becoming permanent. Your ears may have perked up at hearing the idea of Tom Cotton standing in the way of unanimous consent and thereby forcing 2 hours of debate post-cloture on each of these U.S. attorney nominations and saying, what happened to the 30 hours? That's the answer. So back in 2013, they temporarily said the 30 hours of post-cloture debate on a nomination, which you can't amend, is kind of stupid, so let's knock it down to 2 hours. And apparently in 2019, that reduction was made permanent. And
Thanks, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Yeah. We'll take it, right?
I mean, yes, McConnell did it in 2019 in order to just jam through as many of Trump's nominees as he possibly could in the waning hours of the Senate.
Right.
But, use it.
Right. And it's just sort of interesting as a talking point there. Every time we discuss doing something like that, of course, opponents of using the nuclear option or whatever it is, or people who are actually pro-filibuster say, well, you understand, of course, that if we do that, Republicans will use it against us next time they're in control. And nobody ever says anything like, well, Republicans, you shouldn't make this change because Democrats will use it against you next time they're in control. And, I don't know, that doesn't worry them, I guess. And also, it never worries these guys because, I don't know, we always say, if we don't do it, like in 2000, if we were considering this in 2013, making it permanent. Well, I don't know if you want to make it permanent because if you do, Republicans will use it against you. All right, but if we don't do it, won't Republicans just make it permanent then and use it against us?
Uh-huh.
Yes. All right. There they did. Okay, so what are you worried about? Look, if you don't do it and take advantage of it for the 2 years you happen to have control, all it means is that they'll do it to you later anyway, even if you don't. So go for it.
Hence, we have no filibuster of Supreme Court nominees.
Yes.
I mean, and McConnell had the handy excuse of saying, well, Reid did it first, but he would have done it if Reid hadn't.
Yeah.
On lower court nominees.
So, anyway, the other interesting thing about it, I guess, is just another one of these articles where people are discovering, there's all sorts of things that even a single senator can do to drag things out, and they can drag things out on so many nominations that they can actually impede a Republican president and Republican senators' legislative agenda, as though we had not, prepared that memo 3 times already.
As if I hadn't been hammering the minority to do that. As if all of us hadn't been hammering the minority to do that for the past 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Honestly. And it became an emergency once again at the beginning of the Trump administration. But that memo was already written for the George W. Bush administration too. So, and every other Republican administration, you can do these things. So, and they started out kind of well, and then everybody kind of got bored. And I don't know. People will want me to cooperate with the administration. He is, after all, our American president. But by the end, everybody probably regretted that. But there it is again.
It is again. Yeah.
Well, there's other things going on.
I wrote last night and this morning. It took me overnight to ponder it. One of the blind spots we've got with Joe Biden, and that's having been a senator, having been the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and not grokking how critical the Supreme Court is right now to his whole agenda.
Yes.
Not recognizing the scope of the problem here. There are Federalist Society members and Federalist Society adjacent people on the Blue Ribbon Commission he created to explore what to do with the Supreme Court.
Well, and I guess that, I don't know whether was that a nod to, we'll have a bipartisan commission because
it was definitely a nod to that. It was definitely a nod to the idea that, the Federalist Society, they were doing stuff when I was Senate Judiciary Chairman, and look, we did okay, and we got people through it.
Yeah.
It's just, he has been so good and so surprisingly progressive on so many things, but I think the institutionalist in him comes out when it comes to the Supreme Court and it comes to the Senate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's true. He has surprised us on a number of things lately that we thought he was going to be, possible
The
disaster.
best thing, the deficit. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't. The deficit is the least of my concerns right now in saving the nation, and
Yes.
that's such a refreshing thing to hear. That's
Yeah.
that's such a surprising thing to hear from him.
Yes. So yeah, there are a couple of places where he's become surprisingly progressive, and we appreciate that. And I guess we can hold out hope now that might happen elsewhere. But I guess so far it just hasn't, at least on this issue. And I would have thought though at some point he might say, one of my biggest regrets still is handling the Clarence Thomas nomination from start to finish, but especially that finish. By the way.
Especially that finish.
Yeah.
And I think he spent a long time thinking about that. He never really truly apologized to Anita Hill, according to her.
No.
Although he did acknowledge the problem behind it. But it seems like that's sort of the one lasting centrist problem we've got with Biden.
Okay.
And I
Well,
think it's a
could press him on
problem
it.
we've got with a lot of the establishment, including Nancy Pelosi, who utterly dismissed the legislation that a handful of, including Jerry Nadler, who's chair of their Judiciary Committee, the legislation they introduced to add 4 members to the Supreme Court. She just
Okay.
gave it the back of her hand. That's not going to get floor consideration.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the block is.
Okay.
I don't know why they consider 9 members of the Supreme Court, no matter how they got on there, is all we can have.
Yeah. Just
So,
no word.
at least Biden was flexible enough to say, okay, we'll have this commission. But then the commission is not going to be helpful.
Yeah, I don't know. They still believe in these things, and I don't know whether did they evenly divide it somehow. I'm sure they. This is another one of those fun tricks that they haven't figured out. But
they're not deciding anything. It's not it's a commission that he created to, buy himself more time, I think. He's not giving them any power. They're just supposed to consider the pros and cons of various Supreme Court reform ideas.
yeah.
Somehow I don't think that the Republican side of it, including those Federalist Society and extremely anti-choice members of it, are going to think there's any reason to change the status quo.
Yeah, probably not. And it's surprising, but not surprising that they're going to do that. It's just surprising that there's still people who believe that there's something magical about the number 9. And I mean, in the middle of our admittedly progressive discussion of things like, well, we ought to be expanding the number of representatives in the House, for instance, or various other structural changes. It's been a long time since we've made any adjustments, and the country is much, much larger and much more difficult to manage than it used to be. Much more complex, many more people, just all sorts of things that make you think there's really no reason to preserve what is essentially a 19th century holdover. So hopefully we hear more discussion about that.
50 states.
Yes, right.
Senators.
Okay. True. That also. I mean, I guess, I skipped over expanding the size of the Senate because, I think we're stuck with the 2 Senate thing, but that doesn't mean we can't expand the size of the number of states. Right. We haven't done that in some time. Feels like ancient history, though at least it's last century. It's not too far. Still plenty of people who around, some of whom are still in Congress who were pre-statehood activists in their state, believe it or not. But running out of those folks at this point. But I don't know. We're stuck with Don Young, I guess, for the time being.
I guess we are. I guess we are.
And I don't know. I mean, not. I don't know. I don't know when we get through to those guys, considering what they're doing to themselves. Tomorrow, I guess, is the vote in the Republican conference on. I don't know if they're doing it all at once. So have they decided on Stefanik as the go-to replacement so they can do it all in one vote, or are they removing Cheney first and then voting on her later?
I haven't seen how they're planning to do it. I
I
haven't seen how, what the mechanism's going to be, and frankly, I've been paying more attention to just the the crazy fact that in this, it's a Cheney who's being principled.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
It's tough to understand from that perspective. And of course, the idea that the ultra conservative, like crazy, beyond crazy conservative House Republican conference saying, yeah, and the way we'll fix this is replace, Liz Cheney with Stefanik, whose voting record is nothing close to hers. Do what you want, man. Bizarre. I don't care. But
Cheney voted like 98% of the time with Trump. Mm-hmm. Stefanik like 70% of the time with Trump.
But again, with Trump, like the last thing she says is what sticks with him. Oh yeah,
what sticks. Although it was interesting to see. I wrote some of this up yesterday. Huh? The MAGA crew is not particularly enamored of Stefanik. This is the first break I've sort of seen with the MAGA crew and all of the usual commentary with Trump. They have more memories than him, I guess.
Probably, sure. That's not hard to believe. But yeah, I wonder if it'd be funny to see if he was just so stubborn about things and uncontrollable that he got angry with them. If we could somehow play up the break and say, these guys said they didn't endorse the same person as you. They won't do it. What are you going to do about that? Yeah, I'm going to primary them. It'd be interesting to watch, if nothing else. But I'd be curious to see.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. There have been some anonymous quotes to Politico, of course, from House Republicans saying, McCarthy's looking kind of lily-livered in this, and I don't know if this is going to work, and boy, is he going to be able to be Speaker after he caved to these people this way. And every one of those House Republicans who is saying that is going to vote with McCarthy and going to vote to oust Cheney.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't so dangerous for the whole country, it would really be hilarious to watch this implosion. But the problem is we kind of need an opposition party that actually cares about governing.
I guess so. I mean, it would be better.
That, kind of supports the free and fair election of 2020. It's all based on the big lie, and it's all based on the fact that, if you don't like the results of an election, you can just overturn it.
Yes, that's huge, obviously.
And it's kind of a problem for the country.
And we have a couple of Democratic pundits and talking heads who still say, well, they might not do that. We don't know for sure that they'll do that. But I don't know why you pass all these new state laws giving either less power to your Secretary of State if he was a Republican who stood up to Trump, or more power to your Secretary of State if he was a Republican who indicated an interest in helping Trump cheat but was prevented by law from doing so up until now. The fact that they are going in two separate directions in these states, I don't see what else you could possibly read from that.
It's hard to reach any other conclusion, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know. My other thought was, I was wondering what would happen if can we talk to Liz Cheney? Can Liz Cheney allege massive voter fraud tomorrow? By any chance? What if she does that? Like, do they explode? What happens to a Republican because I'm for investigating massive election fraud allegations, but Liz Cheney made them so. But she's not a Democrat. So, I don't know what to do.
She should just do it to throw him for a loop.
Right. She should do it today because everybody knows this is going to... She should do it in his voice. She should do a Trump impression. Everybody knows it's going to be rigged. And see what happens. What, now I'm crazy for saying that it's rigged and that there's going to be massive voter fraud? How many of these... I don't know. Maybe they'll say, well... none of them are, immigrants who aren't supposed to vote. But I don't know. We don't know. What if they got the number of ballots wrong? That would be crazy. We should sneak some ballots in there. Say, look, there's more votes than there are Republican members of the conference. This is obvious fraud. I'm going to throw bamboo pieces in there and everything.
I don't know, Kagro.
There's got to be some way to do this. It's not like they have security at the Capitol or anything. Should be able to get in.
I think it's worth a try. I go do it. You're closest.
Right.
You can go figure this
out. Fall
out.
to me. Okay. Well, I don't know. I thought it might be interesting for her to do something like it just for fun, and she might, not care anymore. She may be out of F's at this point.
She might be.
Let's see.
She might be.
Right. Well, I'll be very interested to see what kind of procedure they use tomorrow. Just if there's any chance that it doesn't end up being Stefanik, because there really is
I have
no
a
reason.
really hard time seeing
I don't know
that
who else would
happening.
step up at this point. But yeah, so I don't know. It's just weird, and she doesn't bring anything to the table except having impressed. Well, this is all you need. Impressed Trump on TV during the impeachment. I thought that's where she came from, but apparently she was in Congress before that. I had no idea.
She wasn't in Congress before that. Running as an independent, running as a moderate.
Right. It's a weird thing. And
she voted against the tax scam bill.
Did she?
In 2017. Yeah. Probably because of the salt tax, because New York.
Yeah.
But still.
Notice. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take much for Trump. I don't care what you did before. Today she said the thing that needed to be said.
Well, and it really doesn't take much for McCarthy.
No. Well, he doesn't have any idea. He probably has almost no idea who Liz Cheney was at the time. Really? Cheney? Dick Cheney? No, Liz. Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
He's not the... He's not brilliant. Let's just say.
I think that's probably fair. Man. All right. I don't know what else is happening that's got your attention. As
what's happening is that the Senate is marking up the For the People Act, which kind of encompasses everything we've just been talking about.
Well, perfect then.
Including the filibuster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I guess, next stage. How far along are they? They're marking up, huh?
Yeah, Klobuchar's committee's marking it up now. And she's gung-ho. Schumer is gung-ho. Mm-hmm. Leadership, pretty much everybody but Joe Manchin, who is the sole Democrat not co-sponsoring it.
Okay.
Is there. So...
Yeah, he's got...
I don't know if they think that this momentum and this near unanimous support will be enough to drag him along, because Republicans, of course, are fighting it tooth and claw.
Right.
McConnell leading the way, saying it's a solution in search of a problem, and they're
when is that an issue?
Take away free speech, and it's complete federal government takeover of states' elections rights and everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what to say. It's a solution in search of a problem from the Mr. Potato Head Party.
Right.
Okay. I guess. But he's got to say something about it, and it doesn't necessarily have to make any sense. And I guess as long as you have the possibility that Joe Manchin seems to believe that it, too, he doesn't have any real sense of it being an issue, whether it's for him or what, or he just doesn't get that he keeps describing things in Republican terms, explicitly Republican terms. Yeah. Of what's happening here, though they're trying to change the rules for elections, and I don't like that. But it's to change the rules, like let more people vote, which is kind of supposed to be the rule of elections of all sorts.
The one person, one vote.
Yeah, that's the one that matters.
Everybody gets to do it. Yeah.
But Yeah, I don't know. And do we get any sense that he thinks that the changes would? It couldn't be that he thinks the changes would hurt him in West Virginia.
No, West Virginia's Republican Secretary of State, I think Secretary of State is opposed to it because of the whole idea of federal mandates that the states then have to figure out how to comply with, and they just can't possibly do it, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's his basis for opposing it. But I don't know how objectively you can sit back, look at this, look at the fact that 47 states have introduced or have passed voter suppression laws, hundreds and hundreds of them, more than 300 at this point, according to Brennan Center's count. Introduced, not all passed, but a lot of them passing, and not say, yeah, this is a concerted effort to keep people from voting, and we have to fix that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not certain how, and I'm surprised that
I guess you'd be Joe Manchin. I don't think, to tell you the truth, that Joe Manchin pays a whole lot of attention to anything other than Joe Manchin.
Yeah. Well, that's
he did meet with Biden yesterday for an hour.
Ah, yes, that's right. And I'm sure I didn't see any actual comment that people were talking about it much. So I guess they had a heart to heart. And nothing happened.
Yeah, to talk infrastructure primarily.
Okay. Yeah, and I suppose at some point they probably said, well, we'll do much better in seeing these projects all the way through to completion if we can also, protect the democratic process along the way so that you can get reelected and people who care about infrastructure instead of just saying every week is infrastructure week and playing with trucks or become president. And that's got to mean something to him. And
yeah,
but not enough. I'm surprised.
The only quote out of it that I've seen is Manchin saying he just knows there's a lot of need out there and he wants to make sure that we meet that need. Okay.
All right. Well, I mean,
well, we don't know. My hope that he had knocked some heads together in this meeting. Biden had. It appears not to have happened, but
yeah. Or no one wants to talk about it. But yeah, I have a hard time envisioning what you do to change Manchin's mind at this point. Although I do think that there was an opportunity for rah-rahing for West Virginia, perhaps, and saying, or maybe about the voting rights stuff and the concerns of the Secretary of State. But he's Republican, so he probably won't respond to it. But West Virginia, I think, surprised everybody by taking its own approach to vaccinations, and they did tremendously with it. And
they did really well. Yeah,
if you can do that, then I think you can get those drop boxes out there, even if they're out in the hollers and people have to, clamber over rocks to get there, whatever it is. I don't know what the objection is, but it doesn't have to make sense for a Republican to oppose these things.
And it doesn't have to make sense for Manchin to mumble bipartisan and Republican and not go along with it.
I would think that West Virginia is cut out for extensive early voting and drop boxes and voting by mail. Seems like the sort of state that it was invented for.
Right.
But okay.
That Joe Manchin.
Where's that guy?
LBJ when you need him?
Right. He would have. They would have gotten along too. He would have said, "It's a pleasure to have my arm twisted by Johnson somehow." I don't know. But, well, maybe the infrastructure payoff will be enough for him at some point. Maybe not. I don't know. I didn't hear. You mentioned everybody co-sponsoring it, but Manchin not doing. Does that mean Sinema actually did?
Yeah, she's on. Yeah. Wow. That doesn't mean she wouldn't vote to get rid of the filibuster to pass it. But, yes, she's a co-sponsor of it as well.
Okay. Well, that's sensible. And, I mean, I guess I could figure – Manchin could do the same thing and just say, I'm not going to change the filibuster to pass it, but I like it. But he hasn't.
No.
So I guess that's the key difference. Okay. Well, we have that to look forward to, I guess. And if their markups, are they scheduled to be finished up this week? It shouldn't take too long.
It shouldn't take too long, although Republicans are coming up with tons of amendments. I don't know if she'll consider any of them. But.
Okay. What then, though? Any word on when the floor consideration may start? Do they delay things to try to...
I haven't seen that yet.
Okay. All right. So big mystery. But maybe next week we'll get some indication or whatever. But don't go on any vacations until the next one. Okay. I don't mind if you do. We miss you. Thanks for coming by. It was,
You're most welcome.
Big gap in our coverage. We missed you, but glad you had a good break. And we'll talk again on next Tuesday, I hope. And
as far as it looks right now, yes.
Yeah, okay. Right, don't stick yourself or anybody else with any needles in between now and then.
Okay.
Keep your glasses on, and I feel like Casey Kasem. Until then, keep your glasses on, and don't jab yourself with any insulin needles. Okay.
I'll do my best.
Okay, I think you can do it. Thanks, Joan. Check in with you then. Time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam. We'll see what we can cram in after this short break. I'm sure it'll be another esoteric collection of
From
things we missed.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Why, look at this. In fact, he'll be covering the markup of the voting rights bill in committee today in the Senate as well. Mitch McConnell, so determined to destroy democracy that he will personally argue against the bill, I guess, when it comes to the floor. Plus more from around the country and around the world, including news from little old Vatican City as well.